My name is Devdutt Pattnaik. I write on mythology, not philosophy. Now, philosophy is very abstract. Mythology has something tangible to work with. It deals with stories and symbols and rituals, and through that, we make sense of the world around us. So, when we talk about humility, for example, I do not think about it in the abstract. I look for symbols and imageries that are communicating a concept called humility. And that is when I realized something very interesting. I remembered a book I had written some time ago for children. It's called Vahan. So it was about gods and their favorite animals, and I was trying to connect the various animals that gods like, they ride, are associated with. And it struck me that the goddess Saraswati is linked with waterfowl, different kinds of waterfowl. Most common is the goose or the hansa, or sometimes the swan, the Rajhansa. But interestingly, also the heron. Look at this picture. So this is the goddess, and you can see that she's linked with the heron. This book is of course designed so that children can color the book, and you have the colored version over here. But if you look at it very clearly, the heron is standing on one leg. Now it's a very famous imagery, and from botanists zoologists will tell you that the heron stands on one foot in such a way that it looks like a reed, and therefore the fish come towards it, and then it catches the fish. And the heron then becomes a symbol of concentration, because if you look carefully, it is looking at the water, waiting for the moment to catch the fish, and it picks up this fish and eats this fish. Now, at another angle, you see that the bird is standing on one foot, and that evokes the imagery of a holy man who stands on one foot. If you go to Chennai, you will see in Mamalapuram this huge stone artwork in which you see this sage standing on one foot with his arms above him, and next to it is a cat who is standing in the same position. This whole idea of a holy man. And then in Hindi, there is this concept called Bagula Bhagat, the holy man who is actually a heron, because he looks like a holy man but behaves very differently when given the opportunity, because he is pretending to be holy, he's pretending to be a spiritual person, but the moment he gets an opportunity, he grabs something that you would never think about. He becomes, for him, the holiness is a performance. It is a way to distract people, make people comfortable. He lays a trap like the heron and catches the fish. Bagula is the heron, and Bagula Bhagat, heron, crane, waterfowl, water kind of birds. But the idea over here is the idea of performance, of pretense, of creating a trap. And that's an important thing to remember when we talk about humility, because humility is a subjective concept, not an objective concept. There is no mathematical way of figuring out how much humility you have. There is no measuring tool to say, are you or are you not humble? So how do we decide who is humble and who is not? Is it we who decide that we are humble? Do other people decide we are humble? And that's a question that people have been pondering about, as indicated by this art, because humility can be a performance. We behave in a particular way to demonstrate that we are humble, when in fact we are not humble. This is just a performance to trick people, a Bagula Bhagat trickery. This Bagula Bhagat is a very important idea to remember when we talk about humility, because how do we know that people are humble? We know what is humility, and it is a desirable trait, because the opposite of humility is arrogance. And nobody likes an arrogant person. We like humble people. But just as humility can be performed, arrogance can be performed also. In Urdu, there is a word ki ye ustad ka chela ustadi seekh leta hai. So the master student learns how to behave like the master, even though he's not the master, and therefore he performs arrogance, as if he knows everything, he has seen the truth, and therefore plays the game. And you see many of these gurus in this world who play the game of, they walk in a particular way, they talk in a particular way, they dress in a particular way, and therefore display wisdom, and like peacocks prance around that they are knowledgeable. Likewise, around them there will be the performers of humility, bowing to the guru, or those musicians who keep touching their ears when they talk about the guru, demonstrating loyalty, submission. And you start thinking, who is actually humble? And how do we know that people are humble? Are we humble because we behave in a certain way? What is the key performance indicator of humility? Why should I be humble? Why should I be arrogant? And I think these are questions that need to be asked in the realm of subjectivity, because there's no way to prove someone is arrogant or humble. I mean, if you are an insecure person who is confronted with someone who challenges your ideas, or you feel intimidated in front of an expert or a genius, you would likely get angry and call him arrogant in order to pull him down. So experts face this all the time when they point out the errors in mediocre people. And when they point out the errors in mediocre people, the mediocre people lash out saying, stop being arrogant, don't show off, don't try to be smart, be humble, you should be kind, don't threaten me, essentially. And you see that all the time. You see this where we are threatened by people who know more than us, who are better than us in the workplace. And we see them as arrogant if they display their genius. But at the same time, we see people who are humble and who don't feel the need to demonstrate and make people around them insecure. And they're surrounded by people who think they're smarter than them. Being humble, it need not be a performance. It can be an observation, because it allows you to see how other people look at the world. And you suddenly realize how people see themselves, even when they do not know enough. Because humility usually comes with wisdom. The more you learn, the more you understand, the more you see the world, you become curious and you realize you don't know everything. And when you realize that you don't know everything, you are curious, you are listening to people. I think that is an indicator for me of humility. You are a seeker because you ask questions, you want to understand. You do not debate or challenge when you are confronted with a new idea, but you ask, why is the other person thinking differently from you? So it's not about going into a debating sparring match where you think you know everything, and therefore anyone who challenges you must be wrong, and that's the sign of arrogance. And instead, you are curious to know, why does a person disagree with you? And by understanding their point of view, you expand your own way of thinking. This kind of conversation reveals so much about humility and arrogance. When people speak to me in the subject of mythology, for example, I hear them use phrases like agree and disagree, agree and disagree. And I realize they're giving themselves the status of a judge. And whatever I'm saying is being judged. If it aligns with what they know, it becomes agreement. If it doesn't align with what they know, they say, I disagree with you. And in the process, they learn nothing, because they are too busy judging to be curious, to seek, to understand, to ask the right questions. And for me, at that moment, I discover the absence of humility and the presence of arrogance. I know the truth, and I'm measuring what I know with what you are saying. And I think that becomes the obstacle to growth. And this is an important thing. I've heard people say that, the guru will tell me that empty your mind and come to me and I will give you knowledge. You have to empty what you already know. And it sounds like a computer software where you sort of reboot the computer and then download a new software with the guru as the cloud from where you will get the knowledge. And this is not the way the brain works. The brain is filled with ideas and information, and a guru helps us join the dots and helps you become autonomous, independent. And for me, that's the key performance indicator of a great guru, who enables me to find myself so that I can leave the nest and fly away. But it is quite possible that the guru creates a beehive where he is the queen bee or she is the queen bee, and everybody becomes a worker bee. And in this ecosystem, humility is the performance of loyalty, and that's what the guru demands, that please be loyal to me, do what I say, and that indicates you are humble. And we all will live happily in this honey rich beehive. And I think these are the thoughts that come to my mind when I think about the word humility. The Bagula Bhagat, it all starts with Saraswati, right? It all starts with her bird who stands on one foot in the water body waiting for the fish to come. And I think that's something to be considered. The idea that not everything is visible. The problem with science is that science only focuses on the measurable. So the material science is very, very objective. The social sciences like politics and economics have some measurement, but ultimately are based on human opinion, argument, subjectivity. And art and literature is only subjective. There is some frameworks to understand things, but you really can't measure anything. And the study of humility and the study of arrogance really comes not in the material science, not in the social science, but in the realm of the humanities, in art and literature. And you realize when you start studying that in order to be measurable, it has to be visible. And therefore, the behavioral nature of humility and arrogance can be seen, but that's a performance. That's the games that we can play to trick people. The gods also play games, right? When the gods play game, we call it the Leela. But when the gods play game, they're doing it in order to uplift you, uddhar, in order to help you see the limitations of your thought. So in the same way, we too can play games with each other. But who's the beneficiary of this game? Who is being tricked? Who is being enabled, empowered, enlightened? With whom are we sharing the knowledge? And it's in this relationship we realized there are spaces where you're allowed to be arrogant, where you're allowed to be honest, you're allowed to be vulnerable. You do not have to submit and pretend to be humble. And I think these are in relationships conversations that I would explore if I would be talking about humility. So think about the Bagula Bhagat and contemplate on these ideas that come to us from our ancestors in the form of stories, symbols, and rituals. Thank you. Namaste.